let me ask you something. If you had to guess, what percentage of Americans retire with at least $1 million saved? 10%? 20? More? If you listen to enough financial conversations, it can start to sound like hitting $1 million is just what responsible people do, like it's the standard milestone everyone reaches before they walk away from work. You hear stories about multi-million-dollar portfolios. You see retirement headlines featuring massive balances. Maybe you even know a few people who seem to have done extremely well. After a while, $1 million stops sounding impressive. It starts sounding average. But here's the catch. What feels common isn't always common. What gets attention isn't always typical. And when you mistake the exception for the rule, it can quietly distort how you see your own progress. So today, we're going to separate perception from reality. We're going to look at the actual numbers, not the flashy examples, not the outliers, and see how many Americans truly retire with $1 million or more. Because once you understand the real data, you may realize the story you've been telling yourself isn't accurate at all. So let's get to the real number. Only about 3% of retirees in America have $1 million or more saved for retirement. 3%. Put another way, that means 97 out of every 100 retirees do not have $1 million. 97. That's not a small difference. That's almost everyone. Now let's zoom out even further. If you look at all Americans, not just retirees, the percentage is even smaller. Only about 2 to 3% of Americans overall have reached that level in their retirement accounts. So the idea that everyone is retiring with $1 million, it's simply not true. But here's why it feels true. Financial media tends to highlight the biggest numbers. The stories that grab attention are the ones about people retiring with $3 million, $5 million, sometimes more. Those stories are interesting. They get clicks, they get views, but they don't represent the average person. When you hear those big numbers over and over again, your brain starts to treat them as normal. $1 million stops feeling rare. It starts feeling like the minimum. And that's where the problem begins. Because when you think something is common, even though it's not, you may start to feel behind. You may feel like you're not doing enough, like you're missing something, even if, in reality, you're doing better than most people. That's what distorted perspective does. It quietly changes how you see yourself. And once you understand the real numbers, that pressure starts to ease.
Now that you know how rare $1 million retirement really is, let's talk about what most retirees actually have saved. For Americans between ages 65 and 74, the median retirement savings is around $200,000. And that word, median, is important. Median means this: half of retirees have more than that, and half have less. It represents the middle. It shows what's typical. Now look at retirees age 75 and older. The median savings drops even further, to about $130,000. That's the reality for the average American retiree. You might hear a much bigger number sometimes, something like $600,000 or more. That's because people often quote the average. But here's the problem with averages. If a small group of very wealthy households have several $1 million saved, it pulls the average way up. It makes the overall number look much higher than what most people actually have. The median gives you a clearer picture of what's normal. So let's put this into perspective. If the typical retiree has around $200,000 saved, and you have $1 million, that means you have about 5 times more than the median retiree in America. 5 times. That's not slightly above average. That's a completely different level. And this is where the emotional shift happens. Because many people with $1 million still feel uncertain. They still feel like they should have more. They compare themselves to headlines or extreme examples instead of looking at the full picture. But when you compare your savings to what most retirees actually have, you may realize something important. You're not behind. You may be much further ahead than you thought. And that perspective changes everything. So why do so few people actually reach $1 million in retirement savings? It's not random, and it's not magic. First, income plays a huge role. Higher income households simply have more room to save. When someone earns more, they can contribute more to their 401k, invest more outside of it, and recover faster from setbacks. On the other hand, middle and lower income households often use most of their income just to cover living expenses. There's less left over to invest. That gap alone explains a lot. Education also matters. On average, households with a college degree tend to have much higher retirement savings than those with only a high school diploma. Education often leads to higher-paying jobs, better benefits, and more access to employer retirement plans. But income and education are only part of the story. Reaching $1 million usually takes time, a long time. For many people who hit that mark, it took 20, 25, even 30 years of steady saving and investing. It didn't happen in a few good years. It happened over decades. And those decades included hard periods, market crashes, recessions, bear markets, times when accounts dropped sharply and it felt uncomfortable to stay invested. The people who reached seven figures didn't avoid those downturns. They stayed through them. That takes discipline. It also takes trade-offs, choosing to save instead of spend, increase in contributions over time, saying no to certain upgrades or lifestyle increases, sticking to a long-term plan even when others are chasing quick wins. So if you've reached $1 million or you're close, it wasn't luck. It was years of steady behavior. It was consistency when others stopped. It was discipline when others pulled back. And that kind of sustained effort is something most people simply don't maintain over decades. That's why it's rare. Now let's look at something even more eye-opening. As of recent data, there are roughly 500,000 Americans with $1 million or more in their 401k accounts. There are also several 100,000 people with at least that much in their IRAs. At first, those numbers might sound big, but remember, there are tens of millions of workers and retirees across the country. When you compare a few 100,000 to the entire U.S. population, it becomes clear just how small that group really is. It's a tiny fraction. So if you've reached that level, or you're getting close, you're not in the majority. You're in a very small club. And that matters. Now, here's where the focus changes. Up to this point, the question has been, how do I reach $1 million? But once you're there, the question becomes, what do I do with it? Because at this level, the size of the account matters less than how you use it. How you structure your income matters. How you manage taxes matters. When you take Social Security matters. How you handle Medicare decisions matters. A well-planned $1 million retirement can work better than a poorly managed $1.5 million one.
Why? Because retirement success isn't just about how much you saved. It's about how efficiently you turn it into income. At this stage, strategy becomes more important than simply growing the number. Here's something most people don't talk about. Even many millionaires still feel unsure about retirement, not because they don't have enough money, but because they don't have a clear plan. Uncertainty doesn't come from the balance. It comes from not knowing how it will turn into steady income. So instead of chasing bigger numbers or comparing yourself to headlines, shift the focus. Stop asking, do I have enough? Start asking, is my plan built correctly? The money is the foundation, but the structure, the income plan, the tax strategy, the coordination is what makes retirement actually work. And when that structure is in place, confidence replaces anxiety. If this conversation has helped you see your situation more clearly, the next step is simple. It's not about saving harder, it's about planning smarter.
If you'd like help understanding how your savings can turn into reliable retirement income, I've put together a free training that walks through the exact framework we use to help people build structured retirement plans. In that training, you'll see how income gets organized, how taxes are managed, how Social Security decisions fit into the bigger picture, and how everything works together. It's designed to give you clarity, not pressure. You won't find hype, you won't find unrealistic promises, just practical guidance that helps you understand your options and make confident decisions. Because at this stage, confidence matters more than chasing bigger numbers. If you're serious about turning what you've built into a retirement that actually feels secure, the link is below. Take a look when you're ready. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.